And another of the big topics is materialism. So Locke was a materialist, as you all know. He thought that there were objects, external material objects, which ideas were caused by, simple ideas of sense were caused by. And we know these things indirectly through directly coming to know their effects, in other words, the ideas that they cause. This was a very troubling thesis. Locke held it to be a fairly straightforward sort of thing. He based his reasoning on the fact that sensation seems to not be voluntary, whereas memory is voluntary, imagination is voluntary. Sensation seems to be more vivid than memory and imagination, and sensation seems to be of a public realm of reasonably constant objects, and it's hard to imagine how, if external objects weren't supporting our ideas, weren't substantive, weren't existent, how all of these phenomena might come to be. But Berkeley and Hume both disagree on the point of abstraction, and Berkeley certainly on Locke's materialism, Berkeley supporting the first modern form of idealism. Hume is a little bit more skeptical, in fact. That's the best way to define his kind of empiricism, is a skeptical empiricism. He thinks it's an empirical question whether or not objects exist outside of ideas, or whether there do exist material objects, but he thinks because of the way of ideas, it's an empirical question that we'll never be able to settle, so we best be skeptical. So though he adopts a lot of Berkeley's arguments, he doesn't adopt Berkeley's idealism. He remains skeptical. Maybe there are material objects, maybe they are acting as cause, but we can't ever know if they're causing our ideas, and we can't ever know whether or not material objects exist outside of the mind. So tracking back a little bit, let's cover this issue of abstraction. So it seems like a fairly innocent operation of the mind that we might abstract from a number of different instances, shared property, or from one object we might dissect it into smaller subsidiary ideas like its color, its shape, and so on and so forth. But this idea of abstraction is a big bugbear for Berkeley and later Hume for the same reason. So I'll just go over Berkeley's reasons for now. So Berkeley thought that it was impossible to even conceive of how abstraction might work. An abstract idea is, for example, whiteness, is supposed to be something that is not really an idea in itself, but something that is shared by a number of different ideas. But Berkeley says, how can we even come to conceive of or contemplate this abstraction, this complex idea? It itself is an idea, and a particular idea with its own particular properties. So in what sense does it mean to say that we've abstracted anything? All we have here is another idea. Now, take it out of the example of whiteness, which is a bit vague and difficult to think of, and put in your other favorite universal concept. Mine is dog. It's impossible to imagine the concept of dog in the abstract sense. Your mental image, your mental picture, if you will, when you're thinking about a dog, is going to have a particular nose, a particular face, a particular tail, a particular color of fur, or at least a particular few colors of fur, and a particular size and a particular shape. So it might have the tail of a Doberman, the size of a Shih Tzu, and the face of a pug. But it's going to have these particular features, these particular qualities, and in no way is actually acting as an abstract concept. Like I said, Hume had this same Berkeleyan criticism of Locke. But I think more significantly, and what I'd like to focus on as we end this first video, is this idea that materialism is in some way incompatible with empiricism. So Locke thinks that these two things are compatible, empiricism and materialism. In fact, he says we don't really understand what ideas are unless we conceive of them as being caused by external objects. Berkeley and Hume beg to differ. So for Berkeley and Hume, well, I'm going to focus here on Berkeley. Berkeley develops this master argument, as it's come to be called. I didn't refer to it that way in your notes, but I have referred to it that way in a few of the discussion boards. The master argument states that in order for something to, well, let's phrase it the other way. Let's put it the other way around. If material objects exist, then we should be able to come to know of them. But we can only know of them through ideas. The idea of something that exists unperceived, or the idea of something that can be existent without being perceived by a mind, is in itself inconceivable. Inconceivable things can't exist, says Berkeley. So therefore, material objects don't exist. Now, Hume adopts chunks of that master argument, though not the premise that if it's inconceivable, it cannot exist. That's the difference between Berkeley's idealism and Hume's skepticism. So Hume says, look, if we can come to know external material objects, then we know them by the ideas that we have in the mind. But these ideas that we have in the mind aren't ever the external material objects, and nor can they be, by hypothesis, they're external material objects. Because we can only know the ideas that are in our minds, we can't ever know whether or not those external material objects exist. So here, once again, you're led to Humean skepticism. Hume has another argument, not in your reading, that actually shows that Locke's argument for a kind of causal realism, a kind of causal materialism, that material objects are known as causes of our ideas, which are their effects, also can't be the case. This is one of the I think, one of the most clever philosophical arguments ever. So Hume says, in order for something A to cause something else B, in this case, in order for a material object A to cause an idea of that object B, we have to have at least the minimal criterion of constant correlation. So wherever you see, and in a temporal sense, so whenever you see A, it's followed by B. Now, that's a matter of empiricism. So whenever you see A, you see B. Now, Hume says to Locke, you can see the ideas, but you can't ever see the external ideas which are their cause. Therefore, you haven't met this minimum constraint of being able to empirically establish causal correlation, temporal correlation. So in what sense can you say that you know A caused B? You don't have any notion of A causing B upon further analysis. Now, once again, this leads Hume to a kind of skepticism, not an idealism, but a skepticism. There might be external objects, but we don't know, and we never will. But nonetheless, Locke here has been in some sense refuted. It's been shown by Berkeley and by Hume that there's really no basis upon which to think, no rational basis upon which to think material objects are the cause of our ideas, or material objects even exist. Now, there's all sorts of, Hume says, natural psychological reasons we human beings develop with this natural impulsive instinct to believe that there are external objects. And Hume doesn't want to downplay that. He wants to say that that's almost a sort of indestructible commitment. Even Descartes and Berkeley, who think that there really aren't material things in the world, don't actually go about their day living as if that's the case. But Hume says the natural impulse and instinct only goes so far. Of course, it's not a rational argument. You haven't rationally uh, been able to show that there are indeed existent material objects that might have a causal effect on our ideas. It's just a belief that we have in the same way that we have all kinds of other natural beliefs which go ultimately unjustified. So that's the first video. As we go along, hopefully these things get a little bit more product value. Please let me know if there's any technical problems or glitches with your viewing of this video. Of course, if there were, you might not have made it to the end, and this might be a little bit of a weird thing to throw in at the end of the video, but please let me know if you've had any problems. And I look forward to seeing you next time, probably in about a couple weeks' time. Great. Nice meeting you.